All right, ladies and gentlemen watching at home, welcome to ISTO Day number 2. It's welcome into the room, everyone here that's here today. It's a not so sunny but wonderful day here in Manhattan Beach. So we're going to get moving and get rolling very shortly, and I'd love to introduce Mark up here to give a acknowledgement to country. In Australia, that's a really important part of what we do to acknowledge the traditional landowners. And if I was in Australia, it would be the Awabakal people from the Eora Nation, and paying respects to past, present and emerging. And I found it really fascinating to learn about the cultures and the way that you guys do things here in the US. And without further ado, please make a warm welcome to Mark. Come on up.
Thank you, Joel. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Chavez. I'm the founder and director of Native Like Water. Native Like Water reintroduces teens and adults back to the ocean culture. Here in Southern California, as you may or may not know, there was a removal of people not so long ago, and we were moved back to reservations. Here in LA, there is no reservations, but in San Diego, there is reservations along the mountain areas. So we've been moved back from our coastal culture. So it's important that we kind of reintroduce ourselves, or reintroduce our what we call our I call native species back to this natural habitat. So it's a piece to a very healthy, thriving ecosystem. So us, as we're still here in California, Native Americans are still here. I am from the Nahua people, which is descended from Mexico, the mainland part of Mexico. And here on this land, we're on Tongva land. So this is here in Los Angeles. They stretch up to about Santa Monica, Malibu, and then becomes the Chumash territory. And then south of Tongva in Orange County is the Hachiman people, and then the Luceño folks, and then Kumeyaay all the way down to San Diego. And that border crossed through Kumeyaay territory. So I'm really seeing a great trend that's kind of happening now with the recognition of the land that we're on and the original people, what we call the First Nations. We have a representative here from World Surf League, WSL Pure, who helped implement that recognition on the World Tour this year, which is important. We see some of the contests happen at Bells and different places, even in South Africa, that they incorporated the cultural components to those stops. And I always sat and I was like, it was a big thing for me that we could recognize our local people here at the Trestle stop at the World Championship Tour. And so this year and last year we've started to do that, and it's been a great thing because it helps bring us out from this erasure. We're visible, we're here, and so it's very important. I don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to recognize that, and everybody could do that when they gather in their groups. Just maybe sometimes spend a little time, a little quiet moment to recognize the First Nations people that are there, or seek out where it is whose land that you're on. It's a very, very important, and I really appreciate the International Surf Therapy Organization for allowing this moment here today. One of the things that we do, let's give it up. As a Native people, we're a very giving people, and I wanted to recognize another tribal people that came from very far away, and we've been following their history, of course, for some years, and that's our South African brothers and sisters here that are here. I have a gift for you guys. Come on up really quick. Come on up. As indigenous people, to fight for your own rights, for equality, it's something very, very steep and special, and I wanted to provide something for you guys. This is our flag. Here we have, as you can see, we have the turtle on there. I like to think of it as us as kind of the turtle nation, because when we study the turtle and what it has to show us, we have a very, very large reach on this planet Earth, and it's something very special. So hopefully you guys have a place you can find to hang this. And here, I know you were looking at my sweater so much, so there you go. And I have a rashi here from these Lakota sisters from South Dakota. They put together a fashion thing, and they made rash guards with actual designs from our tribes. It's not appropriational culture, it's actual culture from us. So I just wanted to give you guys this, and thank you very much. Waves of Change is a very big inspiration. Thank you very, very much. And of course, I don't have much time, so I just wanted to say thank you to Kaliko. He brought out the Subsquatch, our Hawaiian brother here. You know, here on the West Coast, this is a big lake, this ocean here, and out to the Hawaiian folks, we're so glad that we have this education, this water education. These are our mentors. They're these uncles of ours out there on Oahu and Makaha that help resuscitate the culture with the hokulea and many things. So we wouldn't be probably here without the knowledge of our Hawaiians. So it's always good to recognize our teachers. So I just wanted to, Kaliko, and we have the Subsquatch. If anybody's interested, contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good morning, everybody. How are we this morning? Listen, I just want everybody, we've traveled far and wide, some of you from all over the world, some of you from hotels, some Airbnbs, but let's just settle into this time and place. Just take a nice deep breath in and let it out. And just feel that air and that filtered sunlight coming through and just settle into this moment. It's a really beautiful time where we get to all come together and talk about mental awareness, mental health. And I'm really honored today to be on this panel with the National Alliance of Mental Illness. My name is Kevin Sousa. I am the program director and clinical director of the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. Thank you very much. I'm also in private practice with a wonderful group of therapists with offices in Hermosa Beach and Redondo Beach, serving this really wonderful community. On the panel today from the National Alliance of Mental Illness, I have Traute Winters. She is the executive director of the Greater Los Angeles chapter, Los Angeles County chapter of NAMI. NAMI was founded in 1979 as a grassroots organization and has blossomed into one of the nation's leading voices on mental health with over 600 organizations and affiliates all over the country. Dr. Paul Stansbury is president of the South Bay chapter of NAMI, and we're going to hear a little bit about his personal story in just a minute and what brought him to NAMI. He's been with them for almost over 20 years, correct? Yeah? And then at the end, we have Nazneen Chughtai, right? Yeah. She was a nurse and has a program for NAMI called Ending the Silence. It's a outreach program that helps psychoeducate middle school and high school students to be aware of mental health conditions and what to do if you see somebody deteriorating either self or in your family or in your community and a place to go, which is really vital and important right now. But I'd like to start with Traute right now. Please let us know about how, I think as an organization, we can learn from an organization that grew so quickly and services so many communities and the different programs that you run. They're vital to our community. Could you speak to that a little bit and tell us a little more about yourself?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Traute Winters, and it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having us. I've been at the National Alliance on Mental Illness for a little over a year, and I came from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where I had worked for 6 years. So had worked in nonprofit mental health for, a few years. And I became interested in mental health because we do have some mental illness in my immediate family, and so it was an important topic to me. And I saw also what was happening in this country, that there's a lot of work to do around mental illness, and so I wanted to be a part of that, and so that's how I came to NAMI. And as you mentioned, we're the nation's leading nonprofit organization dedicated to mental health and supporting family members who have someone with serious mental illness, but we also support folks who live with serious mental illness. So we have many programs and a comprehensive strategy on how we address mental health. All of our chapters around the country provide resources. We are in every state and virtually every county. We are just in the U.S. I know there's some international people here. I did talk with our office, and I think at some point the next few years we may go international as well. But we have resources. We have a helpline. Both our national office as well as many affiliates run their own helpline. And as you can imagine, when someone has a family member that is diagnosed with serious mental illness, it puts the family in crisis, and they don't often know what to do or where to turn. So many hear about NAMI. They call our helpline, and we help people navigate how to live with a family member themselves with mental illness. So we have many resources that we connect people to, and some of those resources are our own. So we have a lot of classes, and all of our programs are free, no cost to the community. So there shouldn't be any barrier to anyone engaging with us because our programs are all free. So we have classes if a family has someone diagnosed. It's one of the main classes is family to family, or our basics class if family have a youth. And it's an 8-week class that takes people through different mental health diagnoses and also how to interact with your family member, as well as self-care plays a big part as well when you have someone in your family with mental illness. So it kind of gives you a comprehensive overview of mental health. And then we also have classes for people who live with mental illness, our peer-to-peer classes, and those are taught by people. So all of our classes are taught by peers. Our family and basics class are taught by family members like Paul, who have a family who lives with mental illness. So they've been through it. They can really help folks and educate folks because they've been through it themselves. And the same thing with people who live with mental illness. They live with a mental illness. They have navigated it. They live in a good place, and so they're able to show their experience, strength, and hope with people who live with mental illness. And we also have support groups. So in addition to the classes, we have support groups almost every day of the week throughout, our chapter. And many of them are still online. So for example, I know our Japanese support group in the South Bay has people from Japan that, zoom in on that. So, the beauty of the internet is that anyone can zoom in from anywhere over the world. So we have support groups that are run by family members, and then we have peer support groups that are run by peers who live with mental illness. We also do presentations in the community. One is In Our Own Voice, where people who live with mental illness will go out into the community and share what it's like to live with mental illness and how they maintain their health. We have a couple of middle and high school programs, which I think I'll let Naz talk about further. We also do a lot of advocacy. So at the federal level, our national organization does advocacy. One of the areas we've been advocating for, both on the federal and the state level, where we also do advocacy, is 988. How many are familiar with what 988 is? Okay, so about, a third of you, quarter to a third of you. So 988 is a new suicide prevention and crisis hotline, and it was formerly the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which was a long 800 number, and if you're in crisis, are you going to remember this long 800 number? Well, so we advocated along with many organizations, so now we have a 3-digit 988 number. So when someone's in crisis, they can call 988. So I encourage you all to put that number in your telephone that you can share with others or call yourself. And the good thing, too, about that is that it also diverts a lot of calls from 911 because our law enforcement community isn't often educated, in mental health response, although we also do law enforcement training around the country. So we are here in LA County. We work with LAPD, the LA Sheriff's Department, and are part of their training to educate law enforcement officials on, how to respond we have people who, family members who've had someone justice involved. So, 988 is still going to evolve because the funding has just been approved. And so it's going to take, probably 2 to 5 years till it's fully functioning as it should be. And so to divert a lot of mental health crises away from 911, and law enforcement, and to the response of mental health professionals, because a mental health crisis deserves a mental health response, not a law enforcement response. So that's something exciting that's developing nationwide. Other things with advocacy on the county level, many of you may know that LA County Jail is known as the largest mental health institution in the world, and over 50% of our population here has serious mental illness. So kind of exciting. In the last couple of weeks, a motion that we advocated for with the Board of Supervisors was unanimously approved, where they are going to build secure mental health facilities for people with serious mental illness to restore them to competency, because people with serious mental illness shouldn't be in jail. They should be in a treatment facility. So those are the kinds of things we're advocating on the local level. And then we have the state initiatives as well as the federal. So feel free to go to NAMI.org if you want to get involved in any of our advocacy, and it'll also direct you to our state and local affiliates around the country.
Yeah, your organization, it's incredible that it works on the individual level, the family and community level, and then the collective level, and your advocacy for all that. That's really, it's important work. And I think it's something that we aspire to as the International Surf Therapy Organization, to become adjunct services to a program like yourself.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is great. We have a new program called NAMI Hearts and Minds that I'm really excited about, because it talks about the intersection of mental and physical health. And it's not just one avenue that you go see a mental health professional. It's a holistic approach to mental wellness that I think everyone can benefit from, not just someone with serious mental illness. But this presentation is great. It talks about, the importance of spirituality, community connection, sleep, how you eat, just that all levels are important. I mean, especially for someone who has a mental health condition, but, it's important for all of us with the stressful environment we live in to really look at all areas of our life and make sure that we have that balance and that connection to maintain healthy. Because the reality is that 1 in 5 or 20% of us will struggle with a mental health condition in a given year. So that's someone at your table is going to be, struggling with a mental health condition this year. So we are, kind of in a mental health pandemic, if you will. We're, especially our youth, we're struggling even before the pandemic, and now it's only gotten worse. So it's important that we have all these resources, connections, and I think our classes and support groups really can work alongside and complement what you're doing. So hopefully you'll use us as a resource and let folks know about all of our free programs.
Thank you, Traute. That's excellent. And it actually segues right into Paul, your experience with NAMI, how you came to it, and if you wouldn't mind sharing whatever you're comfortable with, your personal journey that brought you to NAMI, and the resources that were available to you, that especially now, since there's such a limited availability with mental health care workers, how that helped you.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's very important we address this topic of mental health awareness and mental health. I grew up in Texas and along the Gulf Coast, and I enjoyed the water there and the thing. When I came out to California, I was sort of shocked by the coolness of the Pacific Ocean, but boy, I tell you, I love it now. I'm a beach person. I'm more of a beach volleyball person than a surfer. My sons are surfers, but this is wonderful. And it's a therapy for me to be in near the beach and in the ocean, and that. So I really admire you for your work in this surf therapy approach. Some years ago, my sons were growing up. We loved the living in here in the area. They were doing fine. My older son went to college. You know, that's a time when parents are real excited about their son going off to college. My second son went off to college. He was away in Chicago. He was doing okay. He was not great academically, but not bad. He was more into sports. He played volleyball in process. But his sophomore year, he came back and his grades were going down. They sort of collapsed, you know. And to maintain his status on the sports, he had to keep his grades up, but he wasn't doing very well. That summer, we noticed he was getting involved a lot in smoking pot. He was starting to, we were having a lot of tension. We thought maybe just part of being growing up, but things were not going well, and we were having a lot of tension in the family. That fall in Thanksgiving, we got a call about 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, you know, as a parent, when you get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's usually not good. He was talking word salad. He wasn't making any sense. He was making all these strange ideas and thoughts, and he was having these hallucinations. So we knew there was a problem. We got him home that Christmas, and he was having issues or problems. That February, he had what we call the first break. That's when he had a psychotic episode. And we were in total shock. I'd taken psychology classes, I'd taken abnormal psych, social psych, and so forth, but I didn't have a clue. It was an emotional thing. It was a whole thing where all of a sudden your son, who you normally could connect with, you could not relate to. He was not there. He was not the same person in the process with that. And so we were on a journey of trying to deal with this. And unfortunately, he developed a dual diagnosis, meaning it was a diagnosis of schizoaffective, but also substance and alcohol abuse. And that's the way he was self-medicating. So we were on a long journey of a roller coaster ride trying to understand how to deal with this issue. We were in chaos. The family, we wanted to keep it quiet. And at that point in time, this was around the year 2000. It was Y2K. I never forget, Y2K was a very momentous year for us in terms of our son developing mental illness. But here we were, not knowing what to do, trying to keep it sort of quiet, not want to talk about it, because we were ashamed, we were in denial in process with this. And he was trying to get back to be the person he was again, but had no real clue. He had gone to the hospital, but he wasn't really getting any real, what we consider treatment, getting some medication, which was good, but in terms of really treatment or therapy, that was sort of not where it should be, and we didn't really know what to do or how to do it other. So we got involved in this long journey and process with it, and we found NAMI. And NAMI, where we started to learn about how to educate ourselves about mental illness, not just from the rational perspective, but also from the emotional perspective, and being with other people and know that we're not alone. There are others out there who have the same journey, and support groups become very important. Now, support group can be for mental illness, it can be for cancer, it can be for grief, or whatever it is, but support groups are so important to our journey and to everyone's journey to learn how to be, you're not alone, you can connect with others, you can find ways to help yourself and help others in the process with this. So I got involved with NAMI, and we got involved in the classes, the family-to-family class, where we learned about how to deal with issues, how to learn a bit more. It was a foundation with that. And in the support groups, we learned about other resources and how to deal with that and the resource with that, and how to support our son. I also got involved in Al-Anon. Now, Al-Anon is, of course, dealing with the drug and alcohol problem. So those are two good combinations with that. So you have NAMI, and we also have Al-Anon, where we can deal with that process and situation with that. So that helps us to sort of be connected. And we learn some inspiring stories of hope and wisdom and progress with people with that, from both the NAMI family and the Al-Anon family in the process with that. So we got involved in that situation, and things moved along in the process with this, and we also had to deal with the family. So part of that was trying to find some type of outlet or process with this. I know for a while there, I became more of a workaholic. I mean, work was a sort of a way to avoid it. Now, work is good, but if you're trying to avoid it, that's not good. You want to sort of, sometimes it's better to deal with it than just try to sort of submerge it and sort of forget about it or try to avoid it. So trying to find some way to can sort of deal with it, understand it, accept it, and so forth. And that's one of the big problems with dealing with mental illness, is to have some insight, to have some acceptance, and be able to deal with that issue and find the right type of medication and find the right kind of therapy for you, whether it's surfing, gardening, whatever it is, find that therapy which works for you. And talk therapy is good too, but also find that thing which helps you to find some purpose in life, something that gets engaged in the process. And that's what we see in our groups. Trying to get that insight is so important, trying to get that acceptance and realize that it's a disability, it's an illness like any other illness. Mental health is like physical health. You can have issues. I always talk about my nephew. My nephew was an athlete in college. He was doing real well playing soccer, but he developed diabetes. Well, all of a sudden, he had to learn as a 21-year-old young person to deal with diabetes. Well, he didn't want to deal with it. He almost died from an insulin shot and so forth with that. So it's the same thing. You've got to learn how to deal with some of these issues that come up in life and to develop that. And so it's one of the things we want to always be aware of is to understand it's not a character disorder. It's a physical illness where your brain's not working quite right, and how to deal with that. And we know now that you can work with your brain. You can work with that mental illness and find the insight, how to deal with that, how to accommodate your illness like any other disability. There's not a cure for many cases. Now, some illnesses are different than others. So there's a spectrum of illnesses. So it's not just one. So we talk about mental illness, but there are different forms and different types. And sometimes they need different types of therapy and different types of medications and different type of support. But there is hope, there is recovery in the process with that. So the main issue we want to deal with is dealing with that is to get people to be aware, to be accepting, to understand it's not a character disorder. It's something that you can learn to live with, and we want to have that acceptance throughout our society and understand that, hey, get help. Talk to somebody. Find that therapist or that person who can work with you to give you the help that you need. And so we are now, my son is doing okay now. He's we're having to be aware this is it's one day at a time. In this issue with that, to see how things go. He's finding he's been clean and sober for a year. He's been taking his medication. He's getting therapy. So this is what it's all about. So hopefully he can continue that journey, but we understand that, hey, it's a journey. And we want to reach out to others and be able to help them to find acceptance and make sure there's, throughout groups like yourself, is to have that way to accept dealing with mental health, just like physical health, and finding what you need and process with that.
Yeah, so I think it's so important we remove the stigma of mental illness, right? And that you touched on so many things, the neuroelasticity of the brain, the ability to incorporate and connect. I think when you get into those situations, you tend to isolate, right? And and as we isolate, as some of the research has shown, that then it deteriorates very rapidly, right? And so having that community and that response and that ability, NAMI really puts together a lot of resources, and I think there is no magic cure. There is no single thing that's going to do it, right? It needs to be that heart and minds, right? Heart and minds. Naz, I'd like to ask you how it is to work, a little bit about your own personal story, what brought you to this work, and also the Ending the Silence program that you do to our youth, because it's, especially now after the pandemic, and we're seeing some numbers that are just the pandemic, mental health crisis that we're in right now. So it's so important for these outreach programs. Could you tell us a little bit about the program that you bring to schools?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the very far city of Redondo Beach. And, I got involved with NAMI because during high school, I had a really difficult time mentally. I wasn't aware of what I was dealing with. I was always in a constant state of fear that was paralyzing. And I would skip school. I would self-isolate. I would self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. In my household, we didn't discuss feelings. Mm-hmm. So they're like, what is feelings? You feel happy all the time. Don't feel sad, or don't discuss, feeling anxious or whatever I was feeling. And I didn't even understand what I was feeling. So fast forward to me at 22 years old. I'm working as a nurse, and I start having severe chest pain. Severe chest pain, like rapid heartbeat, sweating, which I now know is a panic attack. But at that moment, I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was dying. And I got seen by a doctor, and he told me, hey, you're having a panic attack. Do you know what that is? No. He referred me to a psychiatrist. And at that point, I was dealing with so many, I found out that I had an eating disorder. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was in an abusive relationship. And that started my journey of working on myself and discovering what I can do to, deal with the feelings I was feeling. And how I would describe the moment that I think was the most important moment of my life is, like, imagine you can't see, right? Like you can't see far away, you need to go get glasses. That's kind of how I was going through life, is that life was blurry. I was always afraid. And I meditated for the first time with my therapist, and that's when I had glasses on again. I could see clearly. It was a very different experience that I never experienced before. And again, remember, I didn't understand that what I was feeling before that wasn't normal. And through that journey, which it's, mental health wellness is it's a journey that is, like, I feel is forever going. It never stops. You're always on that journey. You're always discovering, you're always learning. And that's the journey that I went on. And I got involved with NAMI because I learned so many tools to help with my mental health wellness that I wanted to share my story. And specifically with the youth, because high school was such a hard time for me. And I feel if help one person in high school so that they could grow up as an adult and have those tools to pull on, that would make my life worth it. And that's a part of why I got involved in NAMI, and why I'm here today. And I'm grateful to be sharing my story a little bit with you guys. So regarding the presentations, what it's mainly about is discussing stigma, right? I feel like sometimes you're scared to, especially at that age, high school, middle school, a lot of times you don't know what you're feeling, or you're scared to tell somebody about it, or you think it's not normal. Like for me, I remember I was like, my parents would say like, oh, people who have mental health issues are crazy, right? That was the stigma at that time when I was in high school. I know that's changing, but people are still afraid. Kids and the youth, middle schoolers, high schoolers, are afraid to discuss it, or they're embarrassed, right? So a lot of what the presentation is me sharing my story and educating them that it's okay to, discuss it. It's okay to not feel okay. It's okay to discuss not feeling okay, and reach out for help. And NAMI has so many resources available to give the community. It's amazing, and it's free. And that's the main reason why we go out to the high schools and the middle schools.
And Naz, could you speak a little bit about, we talked about some cultural differences with your family, that where those feelings were not, where you really had to keep them inside, and how they had to, so the stigma was even hardened around that.
Yeah. So I'm Persian and Pakistani. Well, I'm American, but my mom is from Iran, and my dad is from Pakistan. And in our household, I was taught to always have a smile on my face, and you didn't discuss any type of, internal family issues, or discuss your feelings in general. My mom obviously grew up the same way, and so did my father. A very traditional household where you're just always happy. You have a happy family. You go out, you appear to be very happy. Like, you basically have a mask on of happiness. So by me going on my journey, I changed my whole family. That dynamic, that where I brought up the conversations. I had those hard talks with my family. And that changed the cycle. I broke that cycle with, because it's still going on to this day. Thank you. It's still going on to this day, even though, every, culture, a lot of families, you never know, a lot of times what's going on, and it's important to discuss it and to have a household where you feel comfortable discussing it. And that's what I've helped change my whole family dynamic, by discussing all of this. Yeah,
bringing it out into the light.
Yeah.
Traute, I wanted to ask, or Paul, maybe, because you've been with the program so long, what were some of the growing edges that, as NAMI grew, that you found that were encountered by your organization? As we start to grow beyond exponentially at this point, what are some of the things that you found the organization had challenges with?
Well, the challenge is also just to go out and speak. Take every opportunity you can, such as this, to share the information, to connect with people. You got to. We wanted to keep quiet at first, but in terms of what NAMI is really about is telling your story. Going out and telling that story as many times as you can, and try to just connect with people. Because going back to what Traute said, 1 in 5 persons deal with a mental health condition. It's out there. People don't want to talk about it. So if you're able to connect, tell your story, and that way you can start to, my brother or my sister or my uncle or so forth had a mental illness condition. They'll open up to you, and that way it's very helpful with that. The other thing is just trying to make sure that people understand about things. And I guess the point is that that getting help is important. Seeing a psychiatrist, that's, people say they get a little afraid of that. No, that's good. Seeing a psychologist, seeing a therapist, people have to understand that's a helpful, important step. Getting therapy with that is an important step. So I think some people are just willing to accept that and do that. So it's telling that story, trying to make sure people understand there's hope, there's help. You need to ask for it and so forth for that. And I think sometimes we get so concerned about, we get into denial. We're sort of wired in to say nothing's wrong, we're okay. Sometimes you have to say, if you have a bump or a bruise, and with physical health, hey, something's wrong with my knee or my elbow. With mental health, the same thing. Well, I'm not feeling so good today, or something's not quite right. Now, we all have those days, but if you start to have many bad days, or many days where things aren't going well, then maybe something you need to check out. So you need to be, going to see the doctor is not wrong. Going to see a therapist is good, and probably getting therapy is good. And I think an important part also for us is saying we've had to overcome a lot of misunderstandings in dealing with situations in the general community. One thing that I think is very important maybe to this group is, we embrace the holistic approach, the mind-body approach. And sometimes people don't appreciate that, whether it's yoga or surfing or some other type of form, that's part of your therapy, and sometimes they don't want to fund that. We get some stigma about, hey, you're actually funding for yoga or something like that. That's not, why is that? And people don't understand that you actually need sometimes other forms of support to help on your progress and journey. So it's, just a general lack of understanding the community, which you have to keep working at to try to educate and inform in a way you're supportive. You're not trying to antagonize, you're just trying to help people understand what's needed in the community.
Thank you, Paul. And I think what else you brought up was the word illness, right? And I think there's a stigma around that sometimes, but I go to Merriam-Webster's. Where's Bishop? Where is she? Yeah, she brought it up yesterday, and Merriam's defines illness as an unhealthy condition of the body or the mind. And I also got into the root word of it, and it's a Norse word, ill, and it means origins of being lost in the mist. And so I think as we come out of that being lost in the mist, we can normalize that, because who doesn't get lost through the course of their life, right? Who isn't affected by this or have a family member? And that connectivity and the altruism that works, all these programs, as Traute told us, work by individuals that have gone through that process, giving that back. And I think a lot of our programs do that as well. This time I'd like to kind of turn over to any questions that the audience may have for our panel right now. Anybody? Isabel?
Okay, I tried to write it out to get my thoughts together a little bit better, but I have a couple friends who have tried different methods to help them out. And they haven't always gone well. For example, one of my roommates was in a situation where we called a wellness check, and they said that they're on their way, and they texted us at 2 a.m. and said, hey, sorry, we're running late. And we'd called them at 8 p.m. and said, sorry, we're running late. We had to deal with something else. And, she was in a stable condition at the time, but if she hadn't been, that could have been a pretty traumatic experience. But she was really hesitant to call because in the past, when she tried with other people and other organizations, that didn't go well either. And so she just rather would isolate and just rather deal with it herself than reach out for help. So how can you help someone who's had a negative experience trying to reach out for help have a more positive experience?
Unfortunately, that is sometimes the experience. There is a shortage of mental health professionals, therapists, workers, psychiatrists, and sometimes we just have to be honest and say we're sorry that happened, but that is an experience which we hope for. And also we try to advocate. One of the things we try and do with that is to say we try to find out what happened. So one of the issues that I actually try and do is if we have a bad experience, please let me know about that, because then we can then advocate. We will contact, whether it be law enforcement, or whether it be a county board of supervisors, or whether it be elected official, we will let them know. Say, this is what happened. We need to do better. I'm on the, in the LA County, there are 8 service areas. for the board. I'm on the advisory committee for the Department of Health in this area, Long Beach, South Bay. So we tell the local Department of Health, hey, this didn't go well. This is not good. Because what happens is exactly what you described. Then they don't want to come back. And then you have a worse outcome or you have a poor outcome in the process with this. And so we think things are getting better. But as Traute said, the 988 is a work in progress. We are actively campaigning and working to try to make sure it's better. And we need to hear their stories. If it doesn't go well, we want to hear about it. Because we want to be able to say to the Board of Supervisors, whether it be Supervisor Hahn, Supervisor Mitchell, or elected officials, this is what happened. We want to be able to tell that story with that. And then, so we can't solve the problem in that situation, but we can say, we're going to try and work on it and make it better in the next situation with that.
It's not easy to navigate a mental health condition, and it's kind of like almost trial by error, even with medication. You know, sometimes it can take years for a person to find out, you know, what works for them. So it's important to be vigilant and look at lots of different treatment options and get different options, like from 988, you know, what are multiple resources from them or from us. And you know, the mental health crisis in terms of we don't have enough workers and also culturally competent mental health professionals is a big issue in this country. So there's also, I want to point out, there's some apps out there, like there's My3 app, for example. So, you know, for people who are in crisis, they have put together kind of a plan, you know, here are the 3 people that I'll call or reach out to. And it's important that you have a good network as well, so that, you know, people have that network of support, so that as a community, you know, we're supporting each other, because the reality is we don't always have the professionals out there that are responding or available to respond. So we all need to be there for each other and look at different tools like the 988 app potentially that can help us put together a safety plan for when we are in crisis.
Yeah, I think that 988 is so important, because if you do call 911 and a pet, sometimes it can take hours for a pet team to get there.
Yeah.
And if you are committed to a hospital, there's 2 mental health care professionals that assess in the county of Los Angeles, and you can be in the emergency room for over 72 hours waiting for them just to get to you.
Yeah.
So that 988 is really, really important, so that they have that line of like, normalizing the conversation, right? Assessing whether there is means and opportunity, right? If there's a plan, and like what level we are at, and like, can we normalize like, hey, it's okay to question our existence, right? It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do anything. And I think removing that stigma and having that conversation is so vital to us as healthcare workers. And Joel did an incredible job about talking about safe space to have that conversation earlier in one of our workshops. So I really would encourage us to keep that dialogue open and understand that, you know, suicide ideation is, although can be very, very, very serious, if we normalize it, have those conversations, and assess properly with a mental health care professional, we're better off. We're better off than sending somebody right to the emergency room, because that can create a trauma all of its own.
Correct.
And we do have, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there are now walk-in mental health urgent care centers, and more are being developed around the county. So that's where you can take someone as well, is to a mental health urgent care center. And that's a good resource as well.
Any other questions? Yes. You got it.
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, but we do have a very active NAMI organization there as well. But I'm just thinking, as a clinician, you know, a lot of times people might reach out and maybe I don't serve that population, or, you know, I don't have any openings or things like that. But I'm just thinking, can clinicians also call? Because what I find a lot, and what I found in the past when I was doing private practice, was people calling who, you know, need sliding scale, which is such a, and then with our Department of Mental Health, the wait list could be, you know, and the schools may or may not have a counselor. So I'm guessing, I'm just asking, can clinicians themselves call when they realize like they don't have the skill set maybe, or they don't have the ability to see somebody, and they're trying to just, it can be a lot to stay apprised of like what's out there.
Yeah, anyone can call 988, clinicians, if you have someone who, is not in a good place to call by themselves, maybe you offer, like if you're a teacher and you have a student, you offer to call. So anyone can call, a clinician, or if you're calling, you're worried about a family member or a friend, you can call and get advice on what to do. So anyone can call. And then like in Orange County here in California, the NAMI affiliate there runs the warm line for the county. We have our own county warm line here. And I was talking to the person who runs that line, and Dee Dee Hirsch, who runs our 988 line here in California. They send a lot of warm calls over to that number. And they said they have some people that call on a regular basis. So, that line is available, to people, or, different warm lines. It's just important for people to reach out, and get that connection.
And also there are many, as Traute alluded to, OK to talk, or the text, they can text and so forth. You can use those services just so they can connect. So if somebody is, as I think is referred to as Kevin, is that sometimes they don't come, and that's where concerned. There should be somebody come pretty soon. If they don't come on a timely basis, then you lose an opportunity, and it can get worse. So there are some text to talk. There's some other lines. The Department of Health does have an I Prevail number you can call to get some counseling, and NAMI National has some counseling. So that's getting the resources available to everyone. So if one of their friends or one of their family has an issue, they can help provide that to them, and that can be very helpful to them at that situation.
Thanks. Any other questions? Joel, what do you got? I feel like a talk show host. What do you got, Joel?
You're such a good hype guy. I love it. My question's around language. And often we can mean the best intentions and use language that can be really not strength focused. And we talked a bit about that this week around this concept of labeling and someone being labeled as schizophrenic rather than experiencing schizophrenia, for example. What are the sorts of considerations as people in the sector can we take in or take in mind that we can, I guess, focus on positive language that you've seen that really helps us move ahead leaps and bounds in contributing to positive stigma or removing that stigma and positive mental health in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think instead of using language like someone is schizophrenic, you would say someone lives with schizophrenia, just like someone lives with diabetes. There's the question around mental illness and mental health, and I had that conversation with some of my staff because last week was Mental Illness Awareness Week, and they took issue with, they didn't want us to use mental illness. Well, our national office is still using that, but there's a lot of discussion. So, is it Mental Health Awareness Week? So those conversations are really happening right now, but I think for stigma, it is important how we talk about it, that not saying, well, this person's bipolar or, but this person lives with this. So, how we talk about it is important. The brain is an organ just like any other organ in the body, and as Paul alluded to, it's a imbalance in the body, and we shouldn't look at anyone who lives with a mental health condition differently than anyone who lives with heart disease or diabetes, and so how we talk about it and someone living with an illness, we need to make sure that we're being aware and respectful on the language.
And I think the main thing, we don't want to have them defined by the illness. It's the person. So the main thing is they're not the illness. That's the main. So language matters. The other issue that comes up a lot with dealing with suicide is we're now not saying committed suicide, saying died by suicide. So it's not, when they're ill, they're not making that choice. They're trying to avoid the burden, being a burden or being in pain, so forth. So we are trying to also just be sensitive to that, and it evolves. The language does evolve as we have a better understanding, more insight, everyone, to the language that we use and how we address mental illness. And the other thing is just the whole idea of mental health parity. Trying to treat it like any other illness is a big challenge for us in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, and like Stephanie said being impeccable with your words, right? Like, and kind and understanding. So do we have time for one more question? Anybody? Betty? What do you got? Duke it out. Betty, what do you got?
I would love to hear more from Naz about her experience, cultural experience. Were you able to, I am hearing you were able to affect your family. Were your family able to affect your community? Coming from a similar culture, and I'm really curious about that. It's one of these things that if you can see it from the outside, it's like a sitcom. It's so thank you, and thank you for what you all do. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, I think by just speaking up, alone about my experience and bringing it up within my family, it affected change. It was a ripple effect. So by me talking about it, then it went to my cousin, right? Then it went from my cousin to my aunt. So when it comes to the older generation, I would say it's still a work in progress, but they're becoming more comfortable. So I'm going to share with you, my dad passed away last year. My mother, she doesn't really express feelings much, right? But during this process and holding space for her to share feelings, because we were sharing feelings, it just created a safe space for her to start exploring that. Because at a certain point, at a certain age, it's like you're rediscovering like what feelings are. She didn't, for herself. As far as the community is concerned, we have not done outreach in the community, the Persian community or Pakistani community, but that is something that's definitely going to be top of mind now that you mentioned it. But I feel like everybody everyone can inflict change by just sharing. And I feel like starting with one person, that's why one of my mottos is, spread love one act of kindness at a time randomly. And I feel like by doing that with anybody, like I share my story with strangers, I'm very open. And I feel like that will really affect the community in the long run. It'll be a ripple effect. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the panel, Naz, Paul, Traute. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us for this conference today. It was an honor to have you with us. And we really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you. We did leave some brochures on the table in the back.
They're actually on all the tables.
Oh, on all the tables. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, feel free to reach out and share.
Resources.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'd like to invite Mark and Dina up for their presentation on American Indian communities healing through coastal cultural revival and surfing. You guys are in for a treat. Mark, come on up.